clash of two major television personalities, Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan, got into a testy debate over Piers' admiration for the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Let's take a look.
Maybe he's a better guy than Putin or whatever, and you could say some things about one or not the other, but like if we're just going to define dictator, the first feature of a dictator is he's not elected. So Zelensky's not elected. He's also, well, he's banned a religious denomination. He's murdered his political opponents. He has banned a language group. Those all seem like features of dictatorship to me. He calls himself that, but there's no election that made him president. He blew past the election and said, oh, there's a war. We can't have an election. We're going to change the Constitution. So how is that a legitimate leader? How could you support something like that? That seems, I don't know, like a dictatorship.
Well, I would categorize my support for him as supporting him against an illegal invasion by Russia.
So this is like why we support Stalin against Hitler, because
well, in a way, we had
Hitler's
that debate.
bad, so Stalin must be good. But no, Stalin's also a dictator. So, like, how about we just don't support dictators if we're against supporting dictators?
Tucker continued pressing Piers on his love for Zelensky. Let's watch.
I don't claim it's Mother Teresa against Hitler.
No, but you have, though. You've like, he's a marvelous person.
I like him. I'm allowed to, aren't I?
I guess you like dictators. I've never said of Putin he's a marvelous person because, like, it's a little dictatory for me. I think he's really smart. I admire what he's done to Russia, but I'm not going to sniff his jock because he's kind of a dictator. But you're like, oh, I love that Zelensky. He's so great.
I do like him.
How can you like a man who's a dictator?
Interesting debate.
Interesting choice of phrasing there.
Yeah, I don't care for that, but I mostly agree with what Tucker was saying there. I thought this was a really interesting debate. They got into a lot of subjects. They talked about the World War II Churchill thing. I'm less partial to what Tucker had to say on that subject, although I very much agreed with him. He laid into Piers, we don't have this clip, but over Piers Morgan's support for what Israel is doing in Gaza, and Tucker was just like, I think the murder of innocent children is wrong. I don't know, can't believe you won't say that. But, you know, he points out that, look, I too, Russia illegally invaded Ukraine, and that is wrong, and there's no way around it, so there's nothing nice you should say about the Russian government or about Vladimir Putin. But I don't know how Zelensky can be treated as some shining bastion of liberal democracy when A, the election was suspended, B, they got rid of, they banned all oppositional political parties, they banned oppositional media, they're doing mass conscription of people, including of people not military age anymore. Those all sound like those are, you know, things you suspend. If you suspend liberal principles during emergencies, during wartime, then you're not really governing as a democratic liberal.
Well, I think that they have been dealt a very tough hand, for sure, and that this conflict has lasted far longer, I'm sure, than President Zelensky ever could have imagined that it would. I mean, honestly, I'm not quite sure how the function of elections could carry on in Ukraine, given everything that's happened over the last few years. I mean, it's definitely a dire situation all around.
Yeah, it's a dire situation all around, but then the question becomes, well, are they making it worse? I mean, this is going to end with Russia fully conquering the country at some point, which I think would be terrible. So they should have diplomacy short of that, where, unfortunately, from my view, Russia will end up getting something it wants in exchange for not continuing to mow down every Ukrainian person, which I think would be terrible. But if that results in, you know, the independence or even the Russian territorial gains of the easternmost areas of Ukraine, is that ideal? Absolutely not. Is that better than, you know, us promising the country, as Joe Biden did, that we're going to defend them till the end of time, there'll be an endless supply of money? There's clearly not a political will on our side to do that anymore. It's not resulting in them winning, it's just resulting in them losing more slowly, which you can say, fine, you can make the case, let's help them lose more slowly so that we can do a negotiation, so that the country doesn't entirely collapse. But then you actually have to have that conversation. And I don't know what the problem is. I don't know why it can't be facilitated, but we can't continue to support that. Like, they're not going to have enough people. The whole country is eventually going to fall to Russian control. Our own military advisors think that. Zelensky's military advisors think that. They think the project of propping up the Ukrainian resistance just cannot go on forever. So I don't know why you wouldn't push including the Ukrainian side, to negotiate more fervently.
Well, I think that we have enough resources that we could continue to support them so long as there actually is bipartisan support for that idea. I do think, you know, President Trump came in, He said on the campaign trail that he was going to solve this and end the Russian aggression immediately, and we haven't seen any work in that area to date. Maybe it's happening behind the scenes, but we haven't heard anything about it. If there is a solution to get to a peaceful resolution, I'm sure everybody's on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what Trump managed to do with Israel and Hamas, incredibly. He helped persuade Israel to agree to a deal that had been on the table that Joe Biden, for whatever reason, had been unable to get Netanyahu to sign off on.
Well,
and
I think
now
they
we're
were
seeing
both
the
pushing at the
exchange
end
of, I think it was mostly Trump. He seems to be getting a lot of the credit for it, but it has resulted in the release of hostages, and I think that's great. So I hope Trump, turns his attention to this situation, because it's terrible. And yes, we could continue giving them money and weapons and all those things, but who's even? They are now having to do conscription, falling outside normal military-aged males. There, videos of people being dragged from their homes to go serve in the Ukrainian armed forces. I'm worried about. We've had this experience in the Middle East. Just sending weapons. Well, who's on the ground getting those weapons? If it's now less trained soldiers that are going to immediately surrender when they're overtaken by invading armies, and then all those weapons are going to end up in our enemies' hands. That's exactly the experience we had in the Middle East, with ISIS uses U.S. weapons because they come in and they scooped up the insurgents we funded on the other side. They kill them or capture them, and they take the supplies. I don't want the same thing to happen with Russia.
Yeah, I mean, these are legitimate questions that I think we've been grappling with for decades now under both Republican and Democratic presidents. I think, though, the question about Ukraine at this particular moment is really fundamentally not disconnected from our larger discussion about the role of the U.S. in the world. And I think part of the reason why we saw such strong bipartisan support early on for the conflict was we wanted to support a democracy, and we want to make sure that democracy flourishes and doesn't fall to illegal aggressions from others.
Well, I want to support democracy, but that speaks very much to what Tucker Carlson is saying there. Is it a democracy if they don't have elections? Is it a democracy if they outlaw rival political parties? Is it a democracy if there's no freedom of speech anymore in the country? I understand it's a war, and it's one thing to suspend these rights during a crisis or an emergency, but I tend to think that if the rights go out the door the second there's an emergency, that makes your argument more difficult to make, that you're a good liberal democracy.
Well, I think it is a crisis, and he was elected, and so it isn't as if he seized
Well, he was elected
power.
initially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a country that doesn't even have basic infrastructure in place now because of the relentless bombing and the relentless attacks over the past several years now from Russia. And so I think it's a fair motion to make. It's a fair state to be in, that you don't carry out the normal work of government when you're just trying to keep your people alive.
Coming up, is CBS caving to Trump? We will explain in a bit.